Hello, my name is Sandy Skalski and I write the beginners column for the African Violet magazine called Your First Violets. My presentation today is entitled Caring for Your First African Violets. My focus will be on helping you to enjoy your first violets by increasing your knowledge, because when you know what you're doing, you enjoy a hobby rather than stress over it. I want to help you get the basics down so you can do just that. The talk today is centered around the 10 propers of violet care. I learned about the 10 propers more than 30 years ago when I attended my first Violet Club meeting. I've updated the 10 propers for 2021 and how we grow violets today. I'll finish off by talking about how you can choose your best plants and how to start leaves to get even more plants. But before we get into violet care, let's learn a little bit about the types of violets. Miniature violets are small, as the name suggests. They ideally grow to only 6 inches in diameter. These are terrific plants if you have a nice windowsill or are challenged for space. Don't let their tiny size fool you. Many varieties are very floriferous and blossoms come in every type and color. Some favorites of mine are pictured here: Gleeful Elf, Orchard's Bumble Magnet, Jolly Orchid, and Precious Red. And the little tiny micro mini is Ness's Tiny Flame. Semi-mini violets are a bit larger than the miniatures and grow up to 8 inches in diameter. Some favorites include Ness's Crinkle Blue, Boo Man, Cupid's Jewel, Eternal Orbit. These plants grow best in 2 to 2.5 inch pots. You are probably most familiar with standard plants. Like the mini and semis, these grow in a flat rosette. They are typically from 8 to 12 inches in diameter, but some varieties can be grown from 15 to 20 inches or more. A few of my favorites include Buckeye Nostalgia, Buckeye Cranberry Sparkler, and Buckeye Everlasting. All the violets I've just discussed are single-crowned, which means they have one main growing point in the center of the plant and grow as a flat rosette. Trailing African violets have multiple crowns. That means they are growing new leaves and blossoms from more than one position on the plant. Some trailers grow very thick and bushy, while others grow long trails and might even be grown cascading around the pot. Most are very good bloomers. Trailers are further classified according to their leaf size, not the plant size, as standards, miniature, and semi-miniature. Pictured here are two of my favorites, Foxwood Trail and Rob's Gundaroo. The final type of plant is the African violet species. These are not cultivars, but the natural species as found in the wild. They grow as single crown plants or trailers and in a variety of leaf sizes and shapes. Some are shy bloomers, but others are very floriferous. And they make lovely specimen plants, especially if they're grown in natural light. So let's start with the most basics of basics, water. Did you know that improper watering is a #1 killer of African violets? Learn how to water properly and you will avoid a lot of heartache. So how do you do it correctly? If you have only a few African violets, you can hand water your plants from the top or from the bottom. But before you do, test the soil for moisture with your finger. If it is dry about 1 inch down, it's time to water. Now pour off any that hasn't been absorbed in an hour. Violets don't like wet feet. Wick watering is an easy way to water your plants, especially if you have several plants. An absorbent synthetic wick hangs into a reservoir with half of the wick up into the soil. And here is a pot with a wick and a mason jar as a reservoir. Now you can either add the wick when you repot the plant or use a crochet needle to push the wick into the pot. The wick draws up the water through capillary action. The reservoir can be anything from a mason jar to a deli container or something more decorative. However, if you wick water, you will need to use an extra light potting mix so that the plant doesn't get overwatered. And with that, we transition into the second most critical proper soil. Violets have a fibrous root system, so they need a loose, porous soil with good drainage. Even though we call it soil, violets are best planted in soilless mixes. They are referred to as soilless because they contain no actual soil. They are actually based on peat moss or coir, which is coconut fiber, perlite, vermiculite, and dolomite lime for pH adjustments. Now, if you buy violets from supermarkets or big box stores, they will most likely be planted in a potting mix that holds a lot of water. That's because there isn't much chance they'll get watered on the sales shelf. That potting mix is much too heavy for how people water violets in their home. The photo on the right shows a good mix with a lot of perlite and a poor mix that's very heavy with very little perlite. The bottom mix has the potential to kill a lot of innocent violets, especially if they are wick watered. Now, good potting mixes are available from our AVSA commercial growers, and if you are a beginner, that's a good place to start. However, you could also mix your own if you like to. Here are a few recipes if you like to try and mix your own potting mix. If you wick water, you can use 2 parts Pro Mix BX or Sunshine Mix number 4 with 1 to 2 parts coarse perlite. If you top or bottom water, then that mix can be a little heavier, 3 parts Pro Mix BX or Sunshine Mix number 4 with 1 to 2 parts coarse perlite. You can make adjustments in the level of perlite according to your conditions. In a pinch, you can also take some commercial bagged African violet mix and add a lot of perlite to it. I've used the Fayfard and the Miracle Grow African Violet soil by using it with a 50-50 or 40-60 mixed perlite, and that has worked very well for me. Proper potting. I see a lot of posts on social media with small violets in very large pots. Most of the time, those violets aren't doing very well. Violets have shallow root systems and don't like to be overpotted. Overpotted plants are prone to root rot and other diseases. They will decline and fail to bloom if potted in oversized pots. Ideally, the pot size should be 1/3 the diameter of the plant. So, if you have a 12-inch plant, a 4-inch pot is all you need. Now you should look for the tub or squatty pots rather than the taller azalea pots because there is a significant volume difference. And minis and semis are best planted in 2 to 2.5-inch pots. And trailers prefer very shallow pan pots. Young plants are best potted up gradually into their maximum pot size. Plantlets in 2-inch cups can be potted up into 3-inch pots or even yogurt cups. Once these plants are well rooted, you can pot them into 4-inch pots. Skipping pot sizes won't save you any time and will probably cause the plants to suffer. The plants will fill their pots with roots before they show significant leaf growth. Repot 2 to 3 times per year. Soilless mix degrades and turns more acidic. Plus, fertilizer salts will build up in the soil. Refreshing the soil can encourage new growth and larger leaves. When you repot, simply loosen the soil around the root ball and remove enough of the bottom of the root ball so that when you put the plant in the pot, the petioles will rest on the outer rim of the pot. Let's take a look at fertilizers. African violets benefit from constant feeding with a very dilute fertilizer. To do this, you use a fertilizer at 1/4 the recommended strength, but use it every time you water. If you wick water, you can fill the reservoirs with the dilute fertilizer solution. If you top or bottom water, you could use the same weak solution on your normal watering schedule. You will find a variety of solid and liquid fertilizers suitable for African violets, but before you buy a plant fertilizer, read the label, and you'll see 3 numbers. Let me explain what the numbers mean. Here's an example of the Dyna-Gro over here on the right, and it says 795. That's the nitrogen, the phosphorus, and the potassium. It's 7% nitrogen, 9% phosphorus, and 5% potassium. If it's a bottle says 15, 20, 15, that's 15% nitrogen, 20% phosphorus, and 15% potassium. This is a more concentrated fertilizer. The rest of the percentage is either insoluble or soluble solids and things like water. Now, nitrogen is responsible for the growth of the leaves on the plant. Phosphorus is responsible for root growth and flower and fruit development, and potassium helps the overall functions of the plant. But violets also require trace minerals such as calcium, magnesium, boron, and iron. I think Dyna-Gro is a good fertilizer for beginners. A 1/4 teaspoon in a gallon of water will contain all the trace elements you need for your African violets. Plus, it's a dilute fertilizer, and a 1/4 teaspoon is all you need. You don't need a fancy light setup to grow beautiful African violets. You can grow healthy, blooming plants in natural light. East and northeast facing windows are ideal, but if you want to grow in a west or south facing window, a sheer curtain can help filter the light. It's especially important to turn your plants once a week so that they grow fat and they don't reach for the light. How do you know if your plants are getting the right amount of light? Happy plants will grow in a flat rosette, bloom freely according to variety. Plants that are not receiving enough light won't bloom much if at all. The leaves may reach up or lean to one side. The petioles or leaf stems may grow long and leggy. If the centers are too tight or the leaves are getting faded, the light may be too strong. African violets will grow under a wide variety of artificial lights, including many types of fluorescent lights and LED lights. T12 and T8 are the most common fluorescent lights used for African violets. Lights are typically run from 8 to 10 hours per day. The bottom photo here on the left shows African violets under T12 fluorescent tubes. And on the right, African violets grown under LED lights. These are just strip lights, warm white and cool white, that are attached to the shelf above it. In general, plants are placed about 12 inches from under the lights, with minis a little bit closer. Proper temperature and humidity. These are pretty simple to consider. If you are comfortable, your violets will be too. The ideal temperature is between 65 and 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, 60 degrees Fahrenheit is a yellow zone, and at 50 degrees and below, the plants are not likely to survive. At higher temperatures, you might see leggy growth, and variegated plants may turn a solid green. If you grow in a windowsill, remember that extreme temperatures outside can impact your violets on the inside. Keep your plants a few inches from the window pane. On hot summer days, a fan may help keep your plants and your room cooler. You can also try running your grow lights at night. Proper humidity, 40 to 60%, is best for good growth and flowering. Again, if you're comfortable, your plants will be too. Excessive dryness is more of a problem than high humidity. If you live in a dry climate or need to deal with dry winter air, consider adding a water or to a pebble-filled tray to increase the humidity. Proper space. If you have more plants than space, I totally get you. It's a constant battle. But if you crowd your plants, you could be inviting diseases like powdery mildew, which is a fungal disease which looks like your plants were dusted with flour. You can improve air circulation in your growing area with a small fan. Your plants shouldn't touch. The top photo is a yes, and the bottom is a big no. And this is a good place to remind you that you should only grow as many plants as you have time to care for. Limit your collection to the plants you have time to care for properly. 10 well cared for plants will bring you more joy than a dozen neglected specimens. Proper cleansing. Yes, violets can get a bit dusty, and you can gently run warm water over the leaves, being careful not to get any in the center. Dry them out of the sun. Now, an easy way to get rid of dust, soil, or even pet hair is to wrap the end of a pencil with tape and gently tap the foliage to remove debris. I want to focus more on grooming. Always remove dead leaves and blossoms and older outer leaves. They aren't doing anything for the plant and can contribute to disease. Beginners are sometimes reluctant to take a leaf off. Start grooming plants from the baby stage. The photos here show the removal of baby leaves. Baby leaves are generally a slightly different shape or size or color. Removing them will help shape the plant and direct energy into the healthy, mature leaves. Here is another example of grooming out the older leaves. The arrows are pointing to leaves that are slightly smaller than the leaves further in. Removing them will stimulate the plant to grow larger. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but this is the way show growers grow those large specimen plants. I've changed proper spraying to keeping a healthy collection. When the 10 propers were first written, regular spraying of plants was a recommended practice. And you can't even buy some of the pesticides that were used back then. People are wisely more cautious of using pesticides now, except when absolutely necessary. Prevention is your best bet. Here are my recommendations. First, monitor your collection frequently and isolate suspicious plants. If you notice something is wrong, get an accurate diagnosis. I frequently see people posting pictures and asking, "What is this?" "It's mites," people will say. Well, it might be mites, but unless you actually see one with a magnifying glass, you can't really assume. Some of the symptoms can be caused by over-fertilizing. If you find a problem, deal with it quickly and thoroughly. That can mean spraying the plant and treating it, or just tossing it in the trash. Most problems require 2 or 3 treatments to resolve. Don't skimp, do it right, or don't do it at all. Always isolate incoming plants and leaves. I isolate from 6 months to a year because I have a very large collection and I have a lot at risk. Don't go into your plant room after visiting a garden. There are a lot of insects that will be very happy to hitch a ride on your clothes or your hair and invade your violet collection. Use sticky cards to monitor for insects. This isn't going to prevent a problem, but it's going to tip you off that you have one. The trash can is your friend. If you have a plant and it's not doing well, you can't figure out what's wrong with it, you've tried it, and you can't, and you don't seem to be getting any better, just throw it away. That's what the trash can is there for. Here's a little more on isolating new plants. We isolate because pests and diseases are not always apparent when you first get that new plant. Isolating for at least 3 months is your best bet. Sometimes it could take that long for a problem to show up. Isolation means in a different room and separated from your other plants. And it's not really hard to do. I use those spinach containers that you get with the lettuce and different greens, or stir-like containers, or simply large Ziploc bags. Either will work, and just make sure that before you bring a new plant into your collection, you've isolated it and you're sure that there's no pests or diseases. Is there anything more fun than getting new plants? I don't think so. But you should only buy healthy plants from reliable sources. We're very lucky that we have AVSA commercial growers and AVSA hobby growers and hybridizers that can provide us with beautiful new varieties of plants. Now, I warn against people rescuing dying plants from the big box stores or from Aunt Myrtle or anywhere else. You may be able to rescue the plant, but you also have the risk of bringing a pest or disease into your violet collection. Just don't be tempted. If you're trying to decide which varieties you should grow, good varieties for beginners can be found in the best varieties list and the honor roll that AVSA assembles. These plants have grown well for many people, and they will most assuredly grow well for you. And again, I just caution you to not grow more plants than you can take care of. Sometimes we like to acquire new plants from starting them from leaves. Choose healthy leaves from one row in from the outer row. Snap off the very end of the petiole and cut the petiole on an upward facing angle. Now you can use small cups to root the leaves. Use the smallest amount of soil possible, since the leaf will fill the container with roots before it sends up babies. I also use foam egg cartons for small standards and mini and semi-mini leaves, and also 2-ounce cups for larger leaves. Here's an illustration of using foam egg crates to make leaf starters. The small amount of soil that you need to fill those little egg crates will help you to get some plantlets much more quickly. When nice sized plantlets have formed, simply take the whole thing out of the little cup and gently separate the babies from the mother leaf. Pot up the individual plants, and you can seal them into a bag or a lettuce bin until they're well rooted. Only pot up the strongest plantlets. Take the top 2 or 3 from each leaf, and there are little tiny ones. I recommend that you toss those because they probably won't make good plants. I hope you enjoyed this program on African Violet Basics. Consider adding an 11th proper, consistency of care. African violets respond best to regular, consistent care. Set aside some time each week to spend on your plants. It will be relaxing for you, and your plants will reward you with lush growth and beautiful blossoms. Thanks for listening, and please let me know what topics you'd like me to cover in your First Violets column in the future. Happy growing!